Hi. How you guys doing? Your soon-to-be wife and I had a fabulous conversation this morning. So thank you. Thank her for that. All right. So as you heard, my name is Linda Burns. So I live in Atlanta. I spent 30 years in the film industry. I started as a production assistant, moved into AD work, primarily second work. Although I did first a couple times, but I am more the problem solver and the logistics person. So I spent years as a production manager and finished my career as a producer. Oh man, sitting down, those lights are horrible roads. It's all your fault. I'm gonna come down here because they're blinding me. Oh, that's not better. Oh, it's like I'm back at Atlanta Film Society with all of the lights in my eyes. All right, so sorry. Oh, see, this is why I love him. So I'm here to talk about sustaining a career in the film industry. So I know that there's some people from Atlanta here. How many are local to kind of the tri-state area? Okay, how many people are from like Atlanta area? And how many, you're not from the Atlanta area. No, we're not talking original, just go back to your board. How many, so who was from the United States and not Atlanta or the tri-state area? All right, and who's from outside of the country? Because I know there were some French filmmakers here as well. Okay, so I guess I'll start. How many of you actually work full-time? Well, I say work full-time. Nobody works full-time in the film industry right now. But how many of you are working professionals in the industry? Okay, so you all know we're screwed, right? Yeah. So, I told Ashley, so 3 years ago when I was here, my conversation was very different than it is today. I will never blow smoke up your ass and tell you to move to Atlanta and join the circus and start a career in the industry. Most of you in this room that are left at the end of the day have hair that is more my color, and even though I like to tell myself it's blonde, I know it's gray. So we're not trying to start a career in the film industry. We're just trying to maintain one. So the challenge right now is that there isn't an industry in this country. We have somewhat of an industry, but really breaking, yes, we had COVID, but then things came back full bore. And then we had the strikes, and people who have been asking for decades for what they deserve to have from the studios finally got it. And then the studios looked at all the projects that they had greenlit and ran the numbers with the new contracts and realized it is not sustainable to film. At the same time, we're all old enough to remember cable, and we all got rid of cable because there was a streaming service and then another streaming. They had a cable station and then a streaming service. So they all had a platform and then decided to throw money to all come to a new platform. And now we're all paying this new platform the last couple of years, and now where are we back to? Streaming cable, right? You're paying for Hulu Live or YouTube TV, so we're back to the same model. The problem is they spent so much money making flashy shows to get you to leave cable to come to the subscription services that somehow their CFOs and CEOs didn't realize that they were bankrupting themselves. And that's where we find ourselves today. So they have overextended. They cannot pay or don't want to pay what we all deserve as filmmakers and actors in this industry. So now all of the movies are going overseas again. And I don't think this is like the 90s when I first started in Atlanta, where things went to Canada and then we could create incentives to bring it back. We do not have universal health care in this country. Europe does. All of these other countries are non-union. Someone who costs $650 plus airfare, plus housing, plus per diem, they can get a local now because they've been going overseas for the last 5 to 10 years, not as regularly as they are now, but they've been going overseas. And they have found that that $650 person plus all those other benefits, now they can pay $250 to $350. They don't have to pay residuals. They're not paying those same kind of fringes because of universal health care. So it's a real problem. So features features above $40 million are just not being made in this country right now. Legacy TV shows, those TV shows that are made in Atlanta, New York, LA, that need to be made in those places and have a history of being made in those places, are still being shot in those places. But almost every agent you speak to, Hollywood producer, Hollywood director, anybody who's pitching big budget stuff, they're going overseas, and I don't think that's going to change. 3 to 5 years ago, well, even 3 years ago, if people ask me, where do you think the future of the industry is going, I would tell them, anybody who tells you they know where the future of the industry is going is full of shit, because none of us know. Well, I feel like in the last 6 months, I've realized that I now know it's not coming back. So what is left? Well, you have commercials. There's a lot of big budget commercials. So if you are in Charlotte or in Chicago or New York or Atlanta or, any state that has Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies, there is a commercial market. And not to get into politics, but where is this country headed economically in the next 3 years because of tariffs? So we all know, we have seen, most of this audience is older, or you have parents in the back that remember these times. But when our economy does not do well, we don't spend money on commercials. Because if you're laying off 1,000 people, 500 people, 100,000 people, you can't say, well, I'm going to go make $5 million worth of commercials to sell this new product when you've just laid off all these people. So I don't know if there's an economic recession in our future, but I don't anticipate the future of commercials being super strong. But that's where I would say, if you were young and trying to get into the industry, where I would focus my attention. The film and TV market, super sexy. Everybody wants to work on that. Everybody knows that. People ask me, well, do I know stuff that you've worked on? I was like, well, do you remember the Dodge commercial in 1990? It's like, no, the music videos, sure. People know Snoop Dogg and Jermaine Dupri and, the So-So Def Gang, like the 90s to 2000 music video stuff. People remember those artists, even if it's now a classic artist to you. But I mean, the industry has gone through a revolution, and I think very similar to what we what we saw in the music industry when streaming came out and suddenly you could just download a song instead of going out and buying an album or a CD. All of that has changed. So where does that leave you guys? You're screwed. I told Ashley I'd try to say something positive and happy. So here's what it is. You need to go make your own shit. I mean, that's what it's coming down to. You have to make your own content. The key, however, is that you cannot rely on investors who want to see a return on their money, which anybody who has money, I don't know, it's weird. You spend money, you want to get something for it, right? Angel investors are hard to find, but you don't get trapped by the idea that you need fancy shit to make a story. I think my phone is buried in my jacket somewhere, but you all have the ability to tell a story with your phone, with your iPad. And I know that seems small, but you can use work lights from Home Depot. You can use practical lamps. So what do I mean by practical lamps? Not these things that you rent. There isn't a practical lamp in this room, but in your hotel, in your house, anything that you're just turning on as a regular, you can use those things. You can work. Most of the people who work in this tri-state area, what I love about this community is it reminds me of Atlanta 20 and 30 years ago, 30 and 40 years ago when we were just starting out. Everybody was making content with each other. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. They just wanted to make art, and they all got together and they started making art. How did Atlanta Film Festival start? 40 years ago, actually a little bit over 40 years ago now, 50. I think we're having our 50th anniversary this year. But the people who founded that, who are now retired from the industry and have had fabulous careers, started out as kids out of college who just wanted to make their art. And they raised money, and they started a company, and they got favors from people, and they bought equipment that people could check out. So this was, old film cameras and Steenbeck editing equipment. They got equipment that everybody could use and share. And what has now changed from that is a lot of people, it's consumer friendly, right? How many people in this room have cameras that you can shoot something with? Yeah. So there's a lot of people who have equipment that you can share. Rhodes may want to be a DP on somebody's film, but then he's going to have a film that he wants somebody to work on. So what has been really popular here, and I think has done very well in Atlanta over the years as well, is it's trading favors. You go work on somebody else's project, and then they come work on yours. And you share equipment, and you share resources. But we need new stories. The Hollywood model that I would argue isn't sustainable is the tentpole, right? We've all watched it go from independent films and smaller movies. There used to be space in the multiplex for a smaller movie. Now there's not space, because if you have a $100 to $200 million movie that Hollywood is making as part of this tentpoler franchise, you have to spend another 100 or 200 million to get the money back. So now you've spent somewhere between 100 and 400 million dollars, and you have to make all that money back at the box office and through streaming services to make that. Is that sustainable? I don't know. But sustainability in our industry we're at a crossroads right now. But we need stories, because again, everything is a tentpole, everything is a franchise. We need new voices. The world is much more diverse, and diverse stories are finally starting to get noticed. Hollywood does not make diverse stories because they think, oh, it's good to have black and brown people in stories. They make it because the US is no longer the main audience. So they're playing their films around the world, and that's why they have actors. Behind the camera hasn't really done any better. If Hollywood actually gave a shit about diversity, we'd have way more people behind the camera that were women and minorities. It's the faces in front of the camera, because that's how they're making money, because now it's a worldwide audience. So I don't know how many people were here for the 9 o'clock conversation about distribution, but I think there's a lot more smaller platforms that are coming out. I also run the Creative Conference as part of the Atlanta Film Society, and this year I had a conversation with 3 small distributors, and they are very niche, because when it comes down to it, we all love stories. We want to tell true stories. Documentaries are easier to make, but when was the last time you were flipping through networks and went, oh, I want to watch this documentary, right? You find a star's face and you go watch that story. Documentaries don't seem to make money for them. So there is a distributor who is specifically interested in Hispanic stories, another distributor that was specifically interested in Black and queer stories. So there's all of these niches, and I'm not saying, oh, pick a niche and go make that, but you need to understand the landscape. You need to pay attention to what's happening. Coming out to places like this is super important, where you hear from people who are in the industry what's going on, because a lot of people don't have access. They don't know where to find the information, and they don't know what information is true in this world. So I think what's really important is telling authentic stories, whether they be narratives or documentaries, maybe taking that documentary story and turning it into a narrative. Start with short films, because feature films are hard to make. How many of you in the room have made a feature film? So how many have made short films? Yeah, so twice as many hands, right? Short films are easier to make. They're hard, but they're easier to make. But there's no marketplace for those, right? But that's where you cut your teeth and you learn how to tell stories, where you find your voice, where you figure out your style, and not just what you have to say, but how you're going to say it, which is going to bring people to the table to see what you want to say. Because a lot of people have something to say, but people don't necessarily want to hear it because you're not presenting in a manner that makes people interested, if that makes sense. So write short stories, help other people. Don't get caught up in all the fancy things you need to have to tell those stories, especially the first few times you're making things. Because the first couple of short stories that you direct or produce or DP or production design or even a PA on, let's be honest, are probably going to suck. I mean, okay, well, this is an ego thing, so I probably shouldn't even ask it, because everybody's like, yeah, my first short film was great. No, it wasn't. Let's be honest. Like I years ago, probably 15 years ago, I invited all my friends. So I was involved with Push Theater, and we did this thing called dailies, where we would come up with a challenge every quarter, and we'd have to go make short films. And we did like 200 short films in a couple of years. And we didn't make short films for festivals. We made short films for each other to learn and grow. But afterwards, we would have a monthly screening, and I did like a Linda Burns retrospective. And I told everybody, the sound is not gonna be on. We're gonna watch the pictures. Except for one wonderful short film I produced called Petunia, which was this musical about old people, and it was a garage musical is what we called it, and it's fabulous. But it's because I said yes to everything. As a young I can call myself a filmmaker because I'm a nuts and bolts person who became a creative producer, but I'm not the director, I'm not the storyteller. But all the stuff I said yes to absolutely sucked. It looked pretty, but if you had to listen to the dialogue or listen to the actors say the dialogue, it was fucking bad. It was just bad. So like the first 8 films, it was like, it was mingling and mixing and like watch it on the screen. And then when we got to like, okay, here's the part of my career where I started picking and choosing the good things, because I did commercials and music videos to make money. And then I got broke and wasted my bank account by working on these short films and features. And you could tell that, it's like, okay, here's where I started to pick and choose the things that were good. Now we can listen to the dialogue and watch the acting. But make short films without the idea of becoming famous. Like it's the new thing. Oh, I want to be an influencer. Oh, I want to be, I want to be this. I want to be that. You have to make stories that satisfy you, because if they satisfy you, I think you will have more success than if you're trying to chase what you think an audience wants to see. And that comes back to telling an authentic story. So, how do you tell that authentic story? It's stripping it down to make sure, just like the podcasters were talking, Cookie's stories, no shit, it is phenomenal. She's a hoot, right? She is fun to listen to, but I left this film festival 2 years ago and literally drove to Atlanta and then drove to Florida. It's a 7-hour drive, and that was perfect because I listened to the first 2 episodes when I was here for their podcast conversation and then listened to and I was hooked because it was such a great story. For me, it wasn't about the drugs, it was about the newscasting. That's what I was fascinated with, mainly because that's the reason why I wasn't a journalist, is because I knew I was the type of person that would put myself in the middle of the chaos and I'd end up dead. Like if I would have taken Cookie's path, I don't know how, I don't know, maybe there is a God, because there's no reason she should be alive today. There is literally no reason that Cookie should be alive today. And I knew that if I took that path, I was going to be dead. And that's what was fascinating to me is the news part of the story and the history of the story of what she was involved. So yeah, if you listen to anything I say today, go listen to that woman's podcast. I'm curious if anyone has a question before I continue to ramble on. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not really inspired by the news of the industry going downhill. I'm not surprised.
It's not supposed to be inspiring. It's supposed to be the realistic, like I could sit here and blow smoke up your ass, but what good is that to your life and career, right?
Yeah, that's been there, done that.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how do we get distribution? Because so many people are making their own content. That's nothing new. What do we do with it? Because there's this influx and it's not going anywhere. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, distribution is the hardest part, and it's always going to be the hardest part, because without a star or a name, who's going to watch an unnamed director? Like if if you have no name and no connections and no face, how do you get attention? And part of it is getting on the festival circuit. Don't spend all of your money on Sundance and South by Southwest and Cannes, because you're just giving them money to have these fabulous festivals. You're not going to, it's like 1 in 1,000, if even that is the odds of getting in. I say that I've had 2 things in Sundance and 2 things in South by Southwest. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of the brilliant director writers that I jumped on their coat. I was like, ooh, you're really talented. I want to help you. Distribution will always be the toughest part. I think don't take your film and just throw it up on YouTube. Try the festival circuit, but do your homework. Research the festivals that play things that are in the genre that you have. If you have a horror film, look at midnight screenings, horror festivals. If you have a film about equestrian, look at Tryon, I mean, every festival, you have to go and research the festivals, and it's not just, I'm gonna go to Film Freeway and see where I can send it, how much it costs, and when the deadline are. Don't finish your film in order to meet a deadline, because that's not going to get you in. You need to make sure that you have the best film possible. And sometimes you might consider recutting it after going to a festival. So the film I referenced earlier was a short musical. It's a 37-minute musical about old people. This old man's wife dies, and she comes back to haunt him as a houseplant. And at the end, you realize he killed her with the poisonous petals of the flower, and is all in it. I mean, he rekindles his love with her. He takes her out to, oh, fine, Rose, just cut me off. I can't produce my own stuff. So he kills her with these flower petals, but like you see him like re-establish his love affair with her. And he takes her out for dinner and dancing, all the things that were romantic that he never did when she was alive. And I mean, it was literally an old person musical. It was just really weird. And we got into the Austin Film Festival, which is a writers' festival. And we pushed really hard to get on one of the local stations and have the music played, because the songs were fantastic. And I'm not saying that just, I mean, the writer is really, really good at writing musical theater and songs. And when we got to this radio station said, yeah, we'll have you guys on. And they all talked about how, like, we didn't want to have you on, we didn't want to listen to the stuff. And then one of, like, the interns listened to it, and they're like, wow, this is really good. Like, you guys should listen to it. And then they listened to it, and they're like, holy shit, that's great. But it was the first festival, and it's a 37-minute short film. And this is at a time where it wasn't, cut. People weren't used to that. So we were storytellers. We were trying to create it like a feature. And man, sitting in, after a 5-minute short, 5-minute short, 10-minute short, 5-minute short, the first 10 minutes of our short film felt like 45 minutes. It was awful. Everybody enjoyed it, but we knew instantly we've got to recut this, because and we hadn't been getting into festivals. We got into Austin, but we had been turned down by other places. And after that experience of sitting in the room with our film, because a lot of you are like, oh, I don't want to watch it. So the festival, I've seen it a million times. They don't sit with the audience, they sit out front. And sitting with the audience taught us a big lesson. We need to recut this. We recut it and made it snappier in the first 5 minutes instead of trying to set a tone and create a mood. And that made all the difference in the world, and it went all around the country and got attention. The problem was, at the end of it, my writer-director, who I love dearly, we had a feature ready to go out. I had packages, pitch package. I had all these like cute things that we had made to send out to LA, and he decided, yeah, I know, Linda, you just spent a whole, a couple of thousands and thousands of dollars of your own money to produce this. I'm not ready. I don't want to go to LA. I'm not ready to take it out. Well, okay, so fast forward, that was what? What do you think, JD? That was 90, we did one in 97, 98, then I think this was the 2004 version. So now we're 2025. He's tried to do it off Broadway. He just recorded new songs and has an album out. This is the film that has haunted him forever. And this is a guy who has a closet full of musical ideas. But this story, because he didn't take that opportunity, because he got cold feet and was afraid of failure, and had 2 kids and decided, oh, I need to have a stable job, we never made anything from it. So sometimes it's about taking an opportunity and taking a risk, but really, how do you get distribution? Start with the festival circuit. If you have something that's really, really good and you have professional people who aren't just your mom like, oh, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Find somebody who really critically understands film and says, yes, this is ready to go out. Maybe go to a market, maybe try to book a theater in New York and LA, but a lot of times you'll need an agent or somebody to get the important people into the room. But the bigger festivals that you get into as you have more and more success as an artist, a lot of times that's where you will find somebody who is interested. But again, those are the really big festivals that are really hard to get into. But it's possible. But again, it comes back to, do you have a good story? Did you tell it well? Does it look professional? Is the sound good? Sound is half the picture. Sound is half the picture. Sound is always an issue, sound effects, picking the right music, the right pacing, but and you can have a great story and it may never get anywhere. Art is subjective. It's lightning in a bottle, honestly. So have you been struck by lightning? Well, maybe you have a chance, but distribution will always be the hard thing. And that's why sometimes I say, not sometimes, all the time I say, independent film isn't really sustainable because distribution is so difficult, because it's not the film fun, it's not the film art, it's the film business. And if a distributor if they're gonna give you money and they're not making money, they're not gonna pick anything up. But that's what I love about all of these smaller distributors that are coming out, because they're buying up short films, they're putting together packages that they can sell kind of as not necessarily an anthology, but they can put together similar short films, put it in a 90 to 120 minute window, and distribute that as a longer form content, and you can see a little bit of money from that. I think the guy this morning, 35% maybe comes back to the filmmaker, but then again, where are you getting that 35%? Who is going to that platform? And who is spending the money to see your thing that you don't have a face, that nobody knows you, So marketing, logline, proper poster. That's another huge thing. Understanding what your, cookies over and over, understand what your story is. A captivating logline that pulls people in. And loglines are the hardest thing to write. It's really, really difficult to write a log line that gets somebody's attention. You all have cable, or you've all flipped through movies and maybe you don't recognize the stars, or you're like, oh, that looks interesting, and then you read the description and you're like, and you keep going, right? You don't want anybody to read your description and go, and keep going. Swipe left, whichever, I don't know, I've been married a long time, I don't swipe. Whichever way it is. Yeah, you guys tell me, is it swipe left, swipe right? Oh, that's right, you're married too. Oh. But you guys were there at one time. All right, so, a compelling log line, the poster art. What is the thing that is visually going to drag you in? I see a lot of posters with way too much shit on it. And I can say that now because I used to create posters with way too much shit on them. Like, I did a documentary, and I had this great idea for the poster, and it was like a bike wheel, and it was gonna have all the different people. And, a very good friend of mine who had been in the industry as a props guy but worked as a graphic designer just looked at the thing and said, thank God he felt comfortable telling me, a very strong personality, like, this is crap. No, here's all the reasons why this is bad. And I was very angry. I was like, he's wrong. Drew sucks. He doesn't know what I'm trying to do, man. And he was 100% right. And the poster in the end that we came up with was much better, but it was too busy. So what is, you get one sentence and one picture to grab somebody's attention. If you don't have a Mike Panuski on your, sorry, Mike, we're just gonna come back to you all damn day. This is what you get for driving up from Atlanta. If you don't have if you don't have a face, if you don't have a name, how are you going to pull somebody? So that's a long answer of basically telling you you're also screwed. So I would love to be inspirational and tell you just do it. But I want you to understand the challenges. But the challenges that I'm giving to you aren't to get you to quit. But if you quit because of the challenges I place out, is this really your dream? So when I teach production assistants how to get in the industry, and I'm very honest with them. And we have a lot of people that it's a 2-day boot camp, and after the first day, a lot of people quit. And I'm okay with that. Some people just realize, I want to see my kids. I want to, I'm not ready to join the film industry. I do want to see my kids in the morning. I do want to tuck them in at night. And then maybe 5 years later, they'll take the class again. But other people just quit because I make them stand for 12 hours and they don't like it. Or they failed the test, or they have, it's like, my job isn't to hug them and tell them they can do it. My job is to kick them in the ass and tell them they probably can't. And if you quit your dream when somebody puts up a few roadblocks, you're not going to make it. You have to have talent and drive and ambition. Drive and ambition beats talent all day long. Because I know so many talented people who've gone nowhere in life because they don't have the drive and ambition to keep going when things get tough. If you have both of those things, you can be unstoppable, but it's a slog and it's not easy. It's no different than being a painter, or a dancer. I mean, it's hard work, and there's a reason why people say it took me 20 years of acting or producing or directing until somebody finally noticed me, because a lot of it is just learning your craft and getting really good at it. So that's a long way of saying good luck. Yes, ma'am.
Going with the distribution theme though, where do distributors hide?
Away from everyone.
Like, do they come to festivals that are not a Sundance?
No. I've been involved with Atlanta Film Society for 30 years, and I've been running their creative conference for somewhere like 15 years, behind the scenes a few years before that. And I have been trying to get distributors here forever. 15, 20 years ago, there were smaller distributors that would go on the circuit, because a lot of people don't understand how some of the bigger festivals work. Like Atlanta, we pull, I think, 85% of our submission, or 85% of what we play from submissions, and then the other 15% is what came out at Sundance or South by Southwest, or what the distributors have reached out and said, hey, oh, you want this film that you've heard about from Sundance? Well, if you want that, you've got to play these other 3 bullshit films. So they used to come and do the circuit. They don't do that as much. Last year, I mean, I've literally actively been reaching out to distributors, saying, you don't even have to come to Atlanta. I have a virtual portion of the creative conference. Let's just have a 90-minute conversation on Zoom about distribution. It doesn't even have to be about what you're looking for or how to get distribution. I just want to know how you became a distributor. How did you get this job? What interests you? What are the trends out there? What do you like? Didn't want to have the conversation. So last year, the fact that we had these 3 distributors in, I felt very lucky to have a conversation with them. And it was last minute. It wasn't on the schedule. My executive director reached out to me like, I don't know, I think one day, it's a 4-day creative conference, reached out to me like maybe the end of the first day, and he's like, hey, is there room in the schedule to have a conversation with distributors? I'm like, no, but I'll make one. I don't care if it's 8:30 in the morning, people will come because they want to learn about distribution, because they do hide. And that's why getting into the bigger festivals is helpful. There are markets, there's a market in LA, a market in Brooklyn, but that's expensive. There's Cannes Film Corner, that's expensive. And again, how do you get those eyeballs? A lot of time it's having something that hits on the festival circuit that gets attention, or that even gets into a South by Southwest or a Sundance. That's when suddenly all the PR people start crawling out of the woodwork and they want to represent you, and it's that PR person that gets those people in the room. And sometimes you may have to pay them in advance. Sometimes they'll take a percentage of the sale. But yeah, I mean, it's the worst part. It's the hardest part, and it will always be the hardest part. And I wish there was an easy answer for you. There just isn't. Because there's a lot of great films I've seen at festivals that I've never, ever, ever seen again. And sometimes it's just been, oh, the director's an asshole and nobody wanted to work with him. Or there was some problem with the rights, or the music, or or the conversation wasn't timely. But yeah, distribution is always going to be the hardest part, and that's why, to me, angel investors, if you can find some, people don't invest in the widget, they invest in the people who are making the widget, because they like the people, they have an interesting story to tell. They like working with them, and they want to see them do well. But how many people do we know that can just write a check and not give a shit about getting it back? That's just as hard as finding distribution. So yeah, it's all hard. This industry is not for the faint of heart. It's very, very difficult. I'm not. 3 years ago, I was inspiring as hell, but this year I'm like, it's not easy. The industry has changed, and it's harder than ever to get attention, especially because now everybody has a prosumer camera. Everybody is out telling stories. But there's 90% of those stories are shit. They're absolute shit. So there's always room for good people. There's always room for new and interesting stories told in different ways. So there is a space for people who have something to say, who understand how to say it, who tell it in a good way. But a lot of times it's being in the right place at the right time. Yes, sir.
Do you think, I mean, we were talking about treating it like a business. There's the book Film Entrepreneur, who he says, your film is one thing, but really adding other products to it, adding other, just doing private screenings, going to schools, partnering with grants if it touches a certain thing. Really, the film only becomes like a small portion of the whole thing.
But I think only certain films can do that. So like with Cookie's podcast, if they made that into a film, to the woman who's, I don't think she's still here, but who had the question about, like, did you do something about people who have drug problems? It really wasn't about that, but that's something they could go on the road with. You could go to journalism schools and talk about that and have a screening. And then you could also sit down and have a panel of professionals that are helping people in recovery get past addiction. So I did a film on a triathlete who had cancer. So you could partner with the Leukemia Foundation to do education, so there is that opportunity, but you have to have a specific hook that makes sense to do that. I would say if you're gonna start making your film, like all the behind the scenes stuff, you should always be shooting behind the scenes stuff from early development. There are films that we did 3 years later, but when we first started looking for money, we didn't do a teaser, but we sat down and did interviews with the director and the writer or the lead actor, and we put them in a space that had something to do with it. And it wasn't just a log line and a synopsis. It was, here's what the spaceship is gonna look like. Here's what the futuristic, outfits are gonna look like. Here's what the mechanisms are gonna look like. So, I think that was a strong model, and there is still a market for the educational market. Or you go to Rotary clubs, the Lions Club, all of these places are still looking for speakers to come in and tell inspirational stories. And I mean, that was a model that I was actually thinking about. I don't even remember which film it was, but I thought, oh, this could be interesting, because I got on that speaker circuit, and I thought, well, I could go to Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, colleges, places, whoever would listen, and talk to them about the film and the arts. And I thought that could be an interesting way to do things. And then that film ended up, falling apart, and they went in another direction, and we never ended up making it. But I think it all depends on the product. And if you are not the person who understands how to market the product, find somebody who can. Like, that's something that I'm really good at, is I can read a script instantly and go, oh, yeah, I know the McDonald's toys that would go with this. Petunia. I had little seed packets when we went to the festival they were petunia seed packets, and they were actual petunia seeds, but on the back, it talked about the film and had the screening time. So we came up and we took the little plant with us that was the plant that he would pick up and carry around. And we had a table with seed packets that we hung out. We could give out flyers. So, we worked it to get the butts in seats, because if you could create at a festival a line around the corner, and then you could take photos of the fact that you had a line around the corner. If there's an audience award, did you win the audience award? Well, maybe you didn't win, but maybe you can get the score of the audience award. So that's something that I use to let other festivals know. So if you get into one festival, you could let all the other festivals that you have applied to know, hey, just letting you know, we just finished at the Atlanta Film Festival, and we had a 4.7 audience rating. So in your town, we know that there are people who are into triathlons or whatever it was. Like, I would also look at, is there an audience for the film in this town? Especially with the documentary about it was a triathlete. So I found towns that had triathlons, biathlons, duathlons. Is it close to MD Anderson? So is there a connection? So looking at, how can you tell the film festival that you're going to have butts in seats? Because film festivals are trying to make money too, right? So some of them are provided by grants, and some people have sponsors. But when it comes down to it, it's how many butts are in the seat. So if I can tell the festival that I can get butts in a seat, that might help me get into the festival. That may be something that they weigh, but that's something that you have on your social media page or your website or you use in social media, anything that you can be doing to, from the moment you have the idea to getting it through development, getting it through pre-production, production, post, and everything that goes with that, and then out in, you're constantly marketing and promoting things. And it's a slog, man, because it's not just Facebook, it's Instagram, it's like, it was originally, now there's like 50 different platforms that you're posting stuff on, which is exhausting. And if you're a producer or a director and you have multiple different things you're pitching at the same time, I mean, it's a full-time job just doing the social media for all that. And speaking of social media, make sure you see Giselle's conversation on Sunday at the Mimosa. But yes, what is your question?
Yeah, I have a question. With all of that being said, all of this about the distribution and Hollywood doing all of these remakes, we are also seeing films and web series on YouTube that are doing very successful.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned don't do YouTube. I do notice, as somebody who's in marketing, that filmmakers do shy away from doing the promotion themselves and leaning on like the AdSense that you could get from YouTube or whatever other platform
Yeah.
you're gonna put your stuff on. Because there's lots of, as somebody who buys like influencer contracts for like big corporate brands, there are also influencers or, these ground root ways that you can create your own content and get those eyeballs to your own platform, whether it's YouTube or somewhere else. Why is that something that you think people are shying away from so much?
So when I say don't put your stuff on YouTube, I mean if you're trying to sell your feature or once it's out for the general, like if I finish a film and I'm trying to get on the festival circuit or get distribution and I've already put it on YouTube, I'm not going to get distribution because it's already out there. Now it's out there for everybody to see. However, when you're just starting out and you can't get distribution and you can't, well, then again, is it good? Do you want to put, there is an audience for everybody, right? So there are people who love things that are so bad they're good. But I think if you just want to be a content creator, that's different. And I think there's a difference. There's the filmmaker who wants to take their short film and get money and eventually become a studio-backed director or streaming service. So you want to build your career so that you're getting the money to go into the Hollywood system. And then there's people who want to work outside of the Hollywood system, and they're just making money as a content creator, but they probably have a full-time job or a part-time job until they can get enough eyeballs on their content on YouTube that they're actually making money from it. But even the influencer culture, as I'm sure you've noticed, it's like, is it as positive or is it as effective as it was 5 years ago? Because people started putting all these influencers in movies because, they've got 5 million followers. Well, they put them in a movie, they suck, and none of their audience goes to see those things. So I think, again, it kind of depends on what is your story. I shouldn't even say that. What is your goal for your story? Where do you want your career to go? Not that you may end up in that direction, but where do you want to take your career? What is your goal for this story? Do you just want to get the story out to as many eyeballs as possible because you want to keep people off drugs and you want to help them? Is it a social justice issue? And you just need it to get out there for people to see. Then your path may be different. So I think it really depends on what your goals are, what your story is, who your audience is, and where you can find them. Because right now, if you don't give a shit about making money off the thing you've made, put it anywhere that can get eyeballs, but understand that Google AdSense. Because if you #film, #scary movie, like you're in competition with a million other things. Like the best class I ever took was and this is probably 20 years, I'll get to you, JD. It was a thing probably 20 years ago, and it was a how to build a website class. And it was talking about hashtags and how they worked and Google AdSense and how to make sure that you're not one of 2 million things, but you're one of 1,000 or 100. So it was easier to get eyeballs on you. And that was probably one of the smartest classes I ever took because I posted a video before that class. 6 months, didn't have much traction. After that class, I went back in and edited the things that I learned. And literally overnight, it went from 40 to 800 to 1,200 to 5,000 to, and it just kept building. So that would be my long-ass answer, as all my answers are. Yes, James Taylor.
Giselle's points, are you saying that you wouldn't want to put your film on YouTube because the film festival
I hear that.
first dibs on the film?
Yeah.
If it's on YouTube already, people would just go watch it at home rather than going out to the festival?
Correct, because if you make it accessible to everybody, then there's no reason to come out.
Right, maybe put a teaser on YouTube.
Correct.
Buzz, and so is that kind of where you're headed?
Yeah, I mean, if you're, a lot of smaller festivals don't care if it's a Southwest premiere or an international premiere or whatever. Like there's big premiere films, but for Atlanta, if you've had a screening in Atlanta, unless it's a private cast, if you've made it available to the general public, most festivals and distributors, why would a distributor want to take your film when it's already on YouTube? Because now all the audience who was important to you that you could market to, they've already seen it or could see it. But a lot of times you're starting, so another great class I took was a marketing class, and it was a bullseye. And I heard it, but I'm ignoring it now. So it's a bullseye. All right. So it was a bullseye, and what is the center, right? So the center is like, family, friends, people who are like really interested in this thing. And then what's the outer circle? And so you've got the big wide circle. Somebody earlier, and maybe it was Cookie, saying like, oh, why shouldn't it be for everybody? Well, when you tell your film, it's for all ages, it's for everybody. It isn't. That's unhelpful. Who is the first person who's going to watch your movie? Who is the person who is going to be interested in this story? And then kind of come out from there as a bullseye to identify your audience and then be able to direct market to that audience. But yeah, if you make it available to anybody on a platform, why would a distributor want to distribute it? Because now there's already been eyeballs on it. All the people who would be interested in this topic, it's already been blown. Yes, sir.
What do you think about limited showings? So like if I created a film in Greenville,
Yeah.
and sold out a weekend showing at a theater, and then moved that to...
Absolutely. It's called forewalling. Yeah, it's still possible. The thing is, again, you need to know your audience and where you're going to take it. So you made it here. So this tri-state area, you guys are so supportive of each other. It's amazing, the community that you have here, which is why I like to come and why I add Ashley and a few people from the festival to Atlanta. Because you're super supportive of one another. But you get outside of this area, who's going to come see it? So you need to make sure the place that you're going to has an audience that's going to be interested in it, and that you can afford to rent out the place and make money on it. Because if you don't make money, or the place doesn't make money, you're not going to have money to continue on to do that. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. And that's where maybe finding the schools and the colleges or whatever it is, you've got to find a place obviously that has a screen, but renting a theater and forewalling a theater, which has everything built in, gets expensive as well. But it's certainly, again, you got to do your research and you got to figure it out, and you've got to advance market, but it's possible. But if you raise $20 million to go make that film and are going to try to make, again, it's what can the market bear? And cameraman in the back had a quick question as well, I think.
Yeah, you've addressed it a little bit already in regard to like niche marketing online. I was wondering, it's kind of a super specific question, in regard to like people that want to eventually make it, making feature films, the industry, Hollywood, or streaming service. Would a good idea, since distribution is so hit or miss right now, to start perhaps making like shorts or go with a short form content kind of route? Would that be an okay thing to like maybe do?
I mean, do whatever it is that is your wheelhouse. I mean, short films are less expensive and harder and easier to get your friends together and easier to get donations to make. So start there and get out and do whatever you can. I mean, what I'm saying is, don't think, oh, I'm going to move to Atlanta, New York, and LA, or Chicago, or New Mexico, and I'm just going to start a career in the film industry because jobs are falling off trees like they were 3 to 5 years ago. Literally 5 years ago in Atlanta, I had AD friends who would go to the movie theater on the weekend, and there was somebody at the bar who was their bartender every time, and they built a relationship just every weekend talking. They're like, hey, you ever think about working in the movie? Yeah, I thought about that, but I don't really know anyone. She's like, well, I happen to be a first AD. I like you. I'll give you a day on my movie. When are you available? And we were literally pulling people off the street. Right now, there are people who had careers for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years who are losing their homes, who are divorced, who are committing suicide. Like, it's awful. And I don't tell, like, these are things that are in the trades. These are things that you can read about on social media. Like, things are just very difficult, like the movie industry, or I'm sorry, like the music industry was years ago when things changed. So we are going through something. We don't know really how it's going to come out in the next 3 to 5 years, but now's the time. Find your voice. Go make your art. Make it inexpensively. Find your tribe. Help each other. Build a body of work to the point where you now 3 to 5 years from now are making good art because you understand your voice, you understand the craft, and hopefully in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe things will get better. Or if you can get dual citizenship in Europe, move to Italy, the UK, Bosnia. I mean, that's where, France, like that's where the work is. Everything is overseas. Or look at commercial world, you know, and let's just hope that, you know, the current administration doesn't completely crash the economy. But commercials right now are the only thing in Atlanta that is really sustaining people. And even those aren't happening at the pace they used to.
Even that said, is there still an influx? Because I know there was a mass.
Sorry.
Just really quickly, there was
Yeah.
a mass exodus from Los Angeles. I think it's still happening. Are you still seeing them coming into Atlanta? Or is
Foolishly, yes. I keep telling all my students, stop moving here. I mean, we were full 5 years ago, but now, like, you're going to move here and you're going to wait tables. And you're going to spend, I mean, Atlanta is now one of the, you know, most expensive cities in the country. But we can talk about all this all weekend long. I'm here through Sunday afternoon, and now it is time for speed networking. So we can have these conversations then as well.